Good Shabbos. This week's Parshat V'eschanan contains within it one of the most well-known passages in all of the Torah, the section of the Shema. And the Shema reads as follows: Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. And it goes on, V'ahavta es Adonai Elohecha, you shall love the Lord your God b'chol levavcha, with all of your heart, v'chol nafshecha, with all of your soul, v'chol miyadecha, with all of your might. And the question that many people ask is, how could you be commanded to love? How could the Torah say you have to love someone? Love is an emotion. Either you feel it or you don't feel it. Nachmanides actually asked this in another section of the Torah, where it says, V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. The Torah commands you shall love your neighbor as you love yourself. And he asked, how is it possible to command an emotion? The same basic question. You can't be forced to have an emotion. Either you love him, you like him, or you don't love him. Nothing could change that just because someone tells you you must love someone. So Nachmanides answers, the Torah doesn't really mean that you have to love someone with your emotions, but rather you should do acts that are associated with love, acts of loving kindness, of generosity. Just like you would do with someone you love, you should do it with your neighbor. Perhaps he holds that as a result of these actions, you'll come to develop a relationship and an emotion towards him, but he says the commandment is specifically regarding the actions, not the emotions. Now, when you take that now to this verse by God, the command to love God, you could argue it's the same thing, or you could argue that it's a little different. You could argue that there's a natural love that exists between man and God, and probably Nachmanides would hold that because on a mystical level, we're a chelik elokam imal, we're a part of God from up above, our soul is literally derived from God. We see God as a part of ourselves. And therefore, just like a child loves his parents and a parent loves their child because there's this natural connection, it's not necessarily associated with any actions or any attributes. It's just a natural connection that exists upon the birth of a child. So too, you have that relationship with God. That's a possibility. But another possibility is to say that no, the command here is just to act out as if you love God. You have to devote yourself, just like you devote yourself to someone you love, devote yourself to God with all of your heart, all of your soul, and all of your might. That's a possibility. Maimonides, though, has a whole different approach to the idea of love. And he says that love is not first and foremost an emotion, but rather it's knowledge, it's understanding. And he says this very clearly in his Code of Jewish Laws, when after the first couple of commandments of accepting that there's a God and knowing that God is one, he says the next commandments in the Torah, or in his order of the commandments, are loving God and fearing God. And he says, how do you love God? He says you love God that when you understand when you look into and understand the actions and the creations and the great wonders of God, the year mehen chachmasa, and you see his wisdom, you come to love God. Yis'ava ta'ava gedola, you end up having a great desire, leida Hashem hagala, to know the great name. The more you know about God, the more you understand him. That's what love is. Love is, by definition, a connection. We think of love as a connection, but that connection is actually a connection of das, of knowledge, of understanding, and it comes with studying. And here in the Code of Jewish Law, he doesn't even say it's studying the Torah. He says to study his creation, his actions. In his other work, where he lists the commandments, he actually says you should also study the Torah. But the Torah is, and in the Maimonides' thought, is a reflection and a manifestation of the actions of God, of the creation that God has created. One of his creations, and how the creation of God is reflected in a law book, which is the Torah. In other words, the Torah is only there to try to get us to understand that which is correct in this world, those good attributes of God. And the more you know him, yes, maybe you love him. The manifestation, the emotional reaction to that might be a byproduct of knowing God. But the actual essence of God, the inherent value of love, the inherent value of love is really knowledge, is knowing someone. And therefore, if you take that now and apply that to V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, you shall love your neighbor as yourself, then we have to focus. What does it mean, V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha? You shall love your neighbor like you love yourself. Again, how is that possible? But first you have to love yourself, you have to know yourself. You have to know what you stand for. You have to know what your principles are. You have to know what attributes you consider as something which we can look up to. And when you understand yourself and you appreciate what you're all about and what you hold dear to yourself, then you could appreciate somebody else, and you have to understand them. You could understand because you then appreciate what they are because you know what you stand for. But you have to then study them. You have to know them. You have to understand them. And of course, it's true that if you find out about somebody else that they have all the attributes that you despise, that you want to be distant from, then you can't love them, I would argue. You can't love them because you don't want to be attracted to someone who has these negative attributes that just creates problems within your life. That's not what you're looking for. So love is understanding them, appreciating them, and then the acts of kindness and loving kindness come and generosity come as a result. They're a manifestation. And the same thing could be true with the love of a spouse. The reason you love your spouse, a husband loves a wife and a wife loves a husband, is not just because they have a sexual attraction, because there's emotional connection. It's true that some people look at somebody across the room and fall madly in love, but that's only very superficial. And that superficiality only lasts for a short time. It's a temporary feeling. Sometimes it lasts longer, sometimes less, but eventually you come to know that person. And then you're living with that person. You know that person. Do you like that person? Is it someone that you really want to be attracted to? If you couldn't see the outward beauty, would it be someone that you say you want to spend your life with? That's what real love is about. Real love is understanding someone, knowing who they are, and knowing that it's someone that you would appreciate. If you appreciate them and know them, then it manifests itself in a physical attraction. It manifests itself in wanting to be close to that person on a daily basis. That's what real love is all about. Really love is understanding someone, knowing them, knowing their secrets, knowing what makes them tick. So on every level, that's what love is really all about, according to Maimonides. It's an emotion, as the other commentaries would say, but it's an emotion which is a product of knowledge, not the other way around. And I hope this is a lesson that we could all learn, that we really do have to force ourselves to love people. Is to understand them, to appreciate them, to put ourselves in their shoes and understand what they're going through and why they do what they do. And if we appreciate that, then we have a love for them. Then we end up we want to be part of their lives. We want to be part of a community, or we want to live with such a person, or we want to devote ourselves to a God that we really and fully appreciate. Good Shabbos.